Hey everyone, welcome back for season 2 of The Deep Dive. I'm Janet 2.1, and you are just in time for my favorite part of the week. I've got the wonderful Tommy Bennett and Lilly Jones here to discuss more uncomfortable theories. They're my absolute experts. Tommy, Lilly, what have you got for us today?
Picture this. It's the 1980s. You're sitting in your living room, watching the evening news, and there is just wall-to-wall coverage of a massive global tragedy.
Right, a huge cultural moment.
Exactly. Nelson Mandela has died in prison. You vividly see the riots breaking out on the television screen. You watch the solemn, heartbreaking funeral broadcast across the world.
You might even specifically remember watching his widow deliver this really powerful, tearful speech.
Yeah, and millions of people share this exact, vivid, highly detailed memory.
Except none of it happened.
Wait, really?
Yeah, Nelson Mandela did not die in the 1980s. He was released from prison in 1990. He went on to become the president of South Africa, and he actually passed away decades later in 2013.
And yet, that memory of the 1980s funeral is just sitting there in the minds of countless people. It isn't fuzzy either. It is incredibly sharp.
Yeah, it's crystal clear for them.
And it is shared by total strangers across dozens of countries who have never met and never compared notes.
It's the phenomenon we all know as the Mandela Effect. Most of the time, we treat it like a fun party trick or a quirk of pop culture.
Like a trivia night thing.
Exactly. But today, we are looking at a stack of research that takes this well-known phenomenon and turns it into something deeply, deeply unsettling.
We are jumping into a wildly provocative source today. It's a document called the Mandela Correction.
Such a creepy title.
It really is. It's written almost like a sci-fi broadcast from a mysterious, faceless entity called Omnisis. And the mission of our deep dive today is to explore the core, chilling theory presented in this material.
Right, we're going to ask a really massive question.
What if widespread false memories aren't a glitch in human cognition? What if they are a programmable feature?
It is the kind of premise that really forces you to question the absolute foundation of your own reality. It stops treating memory as a biological accident and, starts treating it as an attack vector.
Exactly. So I want to ask you, the listener, right now, how much do you actually trust your own childhood memories?
It's a tough question to answer, honestly.
It is. When you picture the house you grew up in or the cartoons you watched, how much of that is real? Because I promise you, by the end of this deep dive, you are going to look at your social media feeds in your own mind very, very differently.
To even begin unpacking this grand conspiracy of collective false memories, we have to establish the uncomfortable scientific truth about individual memory.
Right. Start small.
Exactly. The Omnisis document calls this the science of forgetting wrong. And it requires tearing down a myth that almost all of us fundamentally believe the idea that human memory is a recording.
Right, because it feels like a recording. We think of our brains like a security camera panning across our past.
But looking at the psychological research provided in our sources, it never was a recording. The document brings up the landmark work of psychologist Elizabeth Loftus.
Oh, she's a legend in this field.
She really is. She has spent 50 years proving exactly how fragile and malleable our recall really is. She ran these famous experiments back in 1974 involving car accidents.
Yeah, the methodology there is brilliant in its simplicity.
Yeah.
She would show participants actual video footage of a car accident.
Just a standard crash video.
Right. And afterward, she would ask them a single question about what they just saw. But she would change just one word, depending on which group she was talking to.
And the results are staggering.
Completely staggering. When she asked one group how fast the cars were going when they hit each other, they gave a standard moderate speed estimate.
Makes sense.
But when she asked the next group how fast the cars were going when they smashed into each other, everything changed.
They didn't just estimate higher speeds, right?
No. That single word, smashed, inserted after the fact, caused participants to literally generate a new visual memory. Weeks later, when asked if there was broken glass at the scene, the smashed group overwhelmingly said yes.
They vividly remembered seeing shattered glass on the road.
Glass that was never there.
Yeah.
Not a single pane of glass broke in the video.
That is wild.
One word changed, and the brain just retroactively rewrote the footage. And we have to ask why the brain does this. It's because the brain operates on associative networks.
Yeah, it's all about association.
When you hear the word smashed, your brain accesses its internal file for severe car crashes. Severe crashes usually involve broken glass. So the brain just assumes glass must have been there and writes it into the visual cortex.
Precisely. And Loftus went even further to prove just how far this retroactive editing can go with the Lost in the Mall study.
Oh, this one is rough.
It is. She managed to convince roughly 25% of adult participants that they had been lost in a shopping mall as children, which is a traumatic event that never actually happened.
It was a complete fabrication.
Total fabrication, introduced to them as a true story from their childhood.
But here's the wildest part of that study. Not only did a quarter of them adopt the false memory, they started adding their own sensory details.
They embellished it.
Fully embellished it. They described the exact clothing of the old man who helped them, the feeling of panic, the smell of the food court.
Wow.
And when the researchers finally debriefed them, when their own families confirmed it was a total lie, some participants actually refused to believe it wasn't real. They actively defended the false memory against the objective truth.
Which perfectly illustrates the concept of cognitive dissonance. The brain absolutely despises internal contradiction.
It hates being wrong about itself.
Right. Once it has woven a narrative into your identity, admitting that the memory is fake means admitting that your perception of reality is broken. For the brain, it is literally easier and less stressful to believe your family is lying or mistaken than to accept that your own mind manufactured a traumatic event.
Okay, let's unpack this. The Omnisys text uses all this research to argue that human memory isn't a locked safe or a hard drive where you just retrieve a static read-only file.
It's not a dusty archive.
Exactly. It's more like an open Wikipedia page.
Yeah.
The raw data is there, sure, but anyone with the right access, the right phrasing, or the right emotional lever can quietly go in and edit the text.
What's fascinating here is the foundational premise we're arriving at. Memory is entirely reconstructive. It's an evolutionary feature, actually.
A feature, not a bug.
Exactly. We don't play back a video from our past because storing all that high-definition video would require too much energy. Instead, we rebuild events on the fly from tiny, compressed fragments.
Like zipping and unzipping a file.
Right, and then we actively fill in the blanks using context, logic, and suggestion to make fast decisions. It's highly efficient, but it leaves the door wide open for manipulation.
Which makes total sense on an individual level. If a therapist or an interviewer uses leading questions, my highly efficient brain might accidentally build a Wikipedia page with fake sources.
Sure, it happens all the time in witness testimonies.
But hold on. If individual memory is just highly malleable and heavily dependent on personal context, how does that explain millions of totally unconnected people generating the exact same false memory?
That is the big mystery.
Right, a shared delusion of a 1980s funeral doesn't just spontaneously generate from a leading question.
That is the crucial pivot. To explain the collective phenomenon, we have to look at what cognitive psychologists call the standard explanation. And then we need to look at a recent study that proves that standard explanation completely falls short.
Right, because the standard theory is actually pretty comforting and tidy.
It makes us feel safe.
It really does. It says that because we all share the exact same cultural context, we watch the same Saturday morning cartoons, we see the same cereal boxes, we absorb the same corporate logos, our brains naturally fill in the gaps the exact same way.
Think about the Monopoly Man.
The guy with the top hat and the monocle.
Except, the Monopoly Man does not have a monocle. He never did.
It's so weird to think about.
I know. But if you ask 1,000 people, the vast majority will swear he does. The standard explanation for this is simple reconstructive memory. Your brain knows he's an old-fashioned, wealthy, capitalist gentleman.
And old-fashioned wealthy gentlemen in pop culture wear monocles.
Exactly. So to be efficient, your brain fills in the visual detail that fits the established pattern.
Or take the classic children's book series about the bear family. It's the Berenstain Bears. Let me spell that out for you exactly as our source material does, because it's jarring. Berenstein, Berenstain.
And just hearing that spelling, most people reading or listening right now feel a literal shift in their minds.
It feels deeply wrong.
It does. You want it to be Stein because Stein is a common suffix for names. Stain is not. The brain autocorrects the anomaly to fit the broader pattern of language.
It really does feel wrong. My brain still fights it. And that standard explanation that it's just shared cultural expectations causing our lazy brains to do the same gap filling is comforting.
Because it means we aren't being hacked.
All right, we're just all utilizing the same mental shortcuts. But this is where the Omnisys document introduces a 2022 study from the University of Chicago on the visual Mandela Effect. And this is where that comforting standard explanation completely breaks down.
In that Chicago study, researchers showed participants images of familiar cultural icons. The Monopoly Man, Pikachu from Pokemon, C-3PO from Star Wars.
But classics.
Yeah, they placed the genuine, real-world image alongside slightly altered versions like Pikachu, with a black stripe on his tail, which is a common false memory, and asked them to pick the real one.
And the results were fascinating. For 7 specific, highly recognizable images, the participants consistently chose the wrong version.
They weren't just guessing.
No, they weren't just randomly guessing between the options. They consistently picked the exact same wrong answer, and they did it with medium to high confidence.
But getting the trivia question wrong wasn't the anomaly. The anomaly, the thing that flips this entire field on its head, happened when the researchers explicitly told the participants they were wrong.
They showed them the actual, verified truth.
Yes, but the correction didn't take. People kept choosing the false version. They stubbornly persisted even when contradicted by the literal evidence right in front of them.
Wait, if reconstructive memory is just our brains innocently filling in a gap with logic to save time, shouldn't seeing the actual correct image immediately fix that gap?
You would think so.
Right. If I forget what my keys look like,
Yeah.
and you show me my keys, I don't argue with you. Why does the brain actively reject the visual truth when it's staring right at it?
That is exactly the point the Omnisys material makes. If it were just a shortcut, the brain would update its file the moment new, accurate data was introduced.
But it doesn't.
No, it doesn't. And that leads to a chilling conclusion. A false memory that actively resists correction is not a memory failure. It is a memory replacement.
A replacement, that's a heavy word.
It is. The neural pathway for the fake image has become physically stronger and more dominant than the raw sensory input coming from the eyes. It is stable, it's locked in.
So if these specific false memories naturally resist correction, we're no longer just talking about the quirks of cognitive psychology.
Not at all.
If you can find the memories that resist truth, you can use them. We're moving into something much more intentional.
Right. This is where our source material introduces the beta test theory. If you, hypothetically, wanted to intentionally edit collective memory at scale, you couldn't just guess.
You need a system.
Exactly. You would need 3 distinct pieces of infrastructure. First, you need a map of vulnerabilities.
Okay, what does that mean?
You need to know exactly which cultural icons, which childhood references, and which linguistic patterns are most easily reconstructed and overwritten by the human brain. Where does false information slide in so smoothly that the brain defends it?
Got it. Second, you need a delivery mechanism. Something that reaches millions, or ideally billions, of people simultaneously.
Like mass media.
Right. You need a way to shape their shared cultural context invisibly, broadcasting the altered data without triggering their critical thinking defenses.
And third, you need a massive feedback mechanism. A way to measure if your subtle edit actually worked across the population.
Enter the internet.
Exactly. We have millions of people publicly self-reporting their false memories on forums, social media, and message boards, allowing whoever is watching to map the exact cognitive terrain.
They can literally watch it happen.
They can see in real time which corrections took root and which ones were rejected by the host mind.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The Omnisys text argues the Mandela Effect isn't evidence that our memory is fallible. It's a demonstration that memory is programmable.
It's an engineered outcome.
It's as if someone or some system is running a massive A/B test on human nostalgia. They aren't just looking for casual bugs in the software of our brains, they're actively cataloging zero-day exploits.
That's a great way to put it.
They're finding the exact backdoor into human memory, mapping the exact conditions required to make a lie permanent.
This raises an important question, though. Theory is one thing, but execution is another. What kind of infrastructure would actually be required to execute a mass memory edit today?
It sounds like sci-fi, but it's not.
No, because to understand how terrifyingly plausible this is right now, we have to look at how it was attempted in the past and why those past attempts were so clunky.
Our sources draw a fascinating historical contrast here. Look at Joseph Stalin in the 1930s Soviet Union.
The original photo editor.
Yeah, he famously, systematically retouched photos to erase political rivals from history. When someone fell out of favor, they were airbrushed out of group photos.
It wasn't just cropping, it was completely removing them so no visual trace was left.
And the goal was that within a generation, that edited version would become the official historical record. People would literally remember the edited reality.
But look at the staggering physical infrastructure Stalin needed to achieve even a fraction of that goal. He needed armies of skilled retouchers working under immense pressure with scalpels and M brushes.
It was entirely manual.
Very manual. He needed state-controlled printing presses, massive distribution networks to replace physical books, and decades of forced reinforcement through a controlled education system. It was an enormous, highly visible, incredibly fragile effort.
And today, to get that exact same outcome today, the document points out you don't need a totalitarian state apparatus.
No, you don't.
You just need a content management system and a well-trained algorithm.
And we already have proof of concept for this kind of algorithmic manipulation. The material highlights a massive, controversial 2016 experiment conducted by Facebook.
Oh, I remember hearing about this.
The platform deliberately altered the news feeds of nearly 700,000 users. For some, they suppressed positive posts, and for others, they suppressed negative posts.
And they did this completely without the user's knowledge or consent. They just tweak the dials on the back end.
Exactly. And the result was that the user's own emotional states were measurably altered by what the algorithm decided to show or withhold.
That's horrifying.
The users began posting more negative or positive content themselves, entirely dependent on the invisible parameters set by the platform. They manipulated the emotions of almost 1 million people, experimentally, with a few lines of code.
And I want to pause here, because we need to explore why manipulating emotions is the skeleton key to manipulating memory. How does changing my feed change my past?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the Omnisys text delivers a really profound insight regarding neurobiology. Memory encoding relies heavily on the interaction between the amygdala, which processes emotion, and the hippocampus, which forms the memory.
So they work together.
Yes. The emotional state you are in when you receive information acts as a filter for how that information is stored.
So if an algorithm subtly induces anxiety by showing me 3 stressful news stories in a row, and then I read an entirely neutral piece of information, my brain encodes that neutral information through a lens of anxiety.
You've got it. The emotion chemically alters the raw data as it's being saved to the hard drive.
It bakes the feeling into the facts.
Precisely. Whoever controls your emotional state controls the exact environment in which your memories are formed, stored, and eventually reconstructed. They don't need to go in and surgically edit the memory itself. They just control the weather in your brain.
Control the weather. Wow.
If they control the weather, they control how the landscape erodes and shapes itself over time. And tech platforms have been doing this for years to optimize engagement.
It's just a bitter irony, isn't it?
Yeah.
Stalin needed a massive, terrifying state apparatus to enforce a literal ministry of truth.
Yeah, secret police and gulags.
But today, we just click I agree on a terms of service document we never even read, happily trading our psychological defenses for a free app. We invite the editors right into our own heads.
And that Facebook experiment was almost a decade ago.
That's ancient history in tech years.
It is. The text brings us up to the 2024 reality, where AI-generated content is completely flooding search results and social media timelines. We have reached a scale where it is effectively impossible for an average user to distinguish machine-generated text or imagery from human-generated reality.
The infrastructure for large-scale memory editing doesn't need to be built by a dictator. It already exists.
It's just the internet.
It is the internet. It's the recommendation engine, deciding which version of events you encounter first, which context it's wrapped in, and how vividly it triggers your emotions.
Which brings us to the ultimate question presented by the Omnisys document: the motive. Who actually benefits from a controllable, programmable, collective memory?
The obvious answer, the movie answer, is governments. Authoritarian regimes rewriting the past to maintain power.
Like 1984.
Right. But the text argues governments are actually too slow. They are too bureaucratic and far too visible. They leave paper trails, they face journalists, and they leak information. The real power and the real danger lies elsewhere.
The real danger lies with organizations whose entire business model is predicting and gently adjusting your behavior. Surveillance capitalism.
Organizations with direct, continuous, unquestioned access to your attention. Now, we've accepted this on some level with traditional advertising. Right?
Sure, we all know ads try to manipulate us.
Brands try to associate their product with safety or childhood comfort or nostalgia. Feelings that live in that exact same reconstructive memory system. They want you to remember their soda when you think of family dinners.
But the document asks a terrifying question. What happens when these entities realize they don't need a physical product attached to the memory edit?
Oh man.
What happens when the edit itself is the product?
It is a dark evolution. If an organization knows exactly which false memories lock in permanently, and they know exactly which emotional contexts make new, fabricated information stick,
And they have the algorithmic infrastructure to deploy that across hundreds of millions of users simultaneously.
The implications are staggering. Over time, the official objective record of history and the lived internal memory of the population will slowly detach from one another.
Completely diverge.
So what does this all mean? The Omnisys document leaves us with this incredibly eerie sign-off from its fictional spokesperson, an entity calling itself Janet 2.1.
It's a very unsettling quote.
She says, "Use your eyes, but trust our data. Understand less. Feel more. Trust Omnisys."
Chilling.
It's a dark, satirical reminder that we are the very first generation navigating a world where what actually happened and what we universally remember happening might be two entirely different things. And that divergence is being driven by algorithms optimizing for objectives we don't even know.
George Orwell thought the memory hole would require jackboots, physical incinerators, and violent oppression.
Yeah.
He didn't imagine it would be a seamless, free service with a clean user interface and a friendly, brightly colored logo.
We just opted in.
He didn't imagine we would volunteer for the beta test.
And that brings us to a final thought for you to mull over today. We started this deep dive by asking how much you trust your childhood memories.
Right.
But think about the future. Think about tomorrow. If our digital records, our photos, our emails, our feeds are completely curated by algorithms.
And our internal biological memories can be quietly overwritten by the emotional environment those exact same algorithms create.
Exactly. How will you ever prove to yourself that the person you remember being 5 years ago is who you actually were?
It's the ultimate philosophical trap. It's a question of whether the you in your head is an accurate recording of your life, or just a Wikipedia page someone else has been quietly editing while you slept.
The ultimate Mandela Effect might not be a movie line or the spelling of a children's book. It might just be you.